If you look at the prehistoric animal life in Sullivan County, you have three choices you can choose from. One would be an invertebrate type fossil, like this snail or gastropod that came off the Netherland Inroad in Kingsport. These are animals without backbones, and like I said, they're called invertebrates. They're a lot older than the vertebrate fossils. I'm not going to talk about these today, but I just wanted to let you know that there was another facet of prehistoric life that's not going to be covered. I'm going to talk about the vertebrate fossils out of the area, things like mastodon, your mammoth, and so forth. And I want to talk to you about some archaeology and kind of update where we are with that. And at the end, I'll leave room for questions that you might have. Does anyone here not know where Sullivan County is located? I guess everybody's local then. Okay, I just thought I'd better get that off first. I started excavating this area in 1961. I wasn't even old enough to drive at the time, but people would come by and pick me up. We'd go working on some sites on the Nolechucky River in Washington County. And the only thing about that, the only reason I mentioned it, is that I got some real early experience excavating prehistoric sites using professional methods. And I think that was valuable later on in the work that I did. And but it wasn't until 1969 that I really felt like I was contributing to the prehistory of the county. Up until 1969, there were 6 prehistoric animal sites that had already been recorded in Sullivan County. Today there are 14. In 1969, there were 12 archaeological sites in Sullivan County. Today there's 338. So that just gives you, we've grown so much since 1969. And I guess the program today, the essence of the program is some of the things that I've done, some of the things that the previous investigations that were done, and some of the things that other people have done, is try to get you up to where we are with a good overview of where we are today. I want to start with the vertebrate fossils. If we get a perspective of what we're talking about, the dinosaur period ended probably about 63 million years ago at the end of the Cretaceous period. And there's no dinosaurs been found in East Tennessee, by the way. And then if you come on up the geological time scale, you find those gray fossil site material here about 4.5 to 7 million years ago. And they're in a time period called the Miocene and the Pliocene. And like I said, they're 4.5 to 7 million years ago. If you come on up above that, coming toward more recent, the fossils out of Sullivan County are only 10 to 20,000 years old. So what I'm talking about today being found over there is almost 4.5 million years younger than the gray fossil sites you're at. Some of the early work that was done here, in 1823, John Haywood wrote in his Natural and Aboriginal History of Tennessee about a mammoth being found in eastern Sullivan County in a lick. I think it was a lower jaw, still had some of the molars in it. In 1832, S.H. Long was cutting a road through Cooks Valley, or near Chestnut Ridge, and he ran up on a mastodon skeleton. At least one of the tusks was still in there. And then in 1922, Gerard Folk with the Smithsonian came into the area, and he found a tapir tooth in a cave in Bluff City. And in 1923, Oliver Hay did work with Smithsonian and also the Carnegie Institution of Washington in a book recorded 2 tapir teeth out of Bristol, a mastodon molar out of Kingsport. He didn't give the exact location, but they were recorded in the book. And then in the late 60s, there was another mastodon molar, juvenile, found in Sullivan County. So up to 1969, we had 6 sites. We had 2 tapir sites, 3 mastodon, and 1 mammoth, already up to that period of time. In 1969, I was going in a cave, and walking along the path in the cave, there was a lot of broken bones on the floor that people had walked on and broken. And being curious, I've been over, looked at them, and I just happened to notice in a talus or slope beside him in this red clay was sealed a layer of bone underneath this red clay, so I knew they had to have some age to it. I got some of the bones. I sent them to the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh. And the reason I chose Carnegie over the Smithsonian is that at that time, John Gilday was the associate curator of vertebrate fossils at Carnegie, and he'd expressed interest about looking at bones up and down the Appalachian Valley, or the Ridge and Valley Province, which runs from Pennsylvania down into our area. So I sent the bones up there, and they identified them as prehistoric extinct peccary. Peccary, Platygonus compressus, and a peccary is a mammal that's related to the hog. They weren't built like a pig as you'd think. They're built more slender-limbed, like a small deer. They were built more like probably a small deer than a pig. But anyway, they said in the letter when they returned, when I got the return letter, that they were interested in maybe coming down and working on that site with me. And so they were applying for NSF grants and so forth. When they came down in 1969, I had found 2 other sites before they got here. And they, in the next 2 years, they made 4 trips to Sullivan County. And during that time, 6 total sites had been found. And in 1980, there was another site found in Sullivan County. In 1991, there was another site found. So now we have 14 sites in Sullivan County. That 14 sites, I haven't checked probably 8 or 10 years ago, but the state of Tennessee had 123 Pleistocene sites at that time, and Sullivan County had 14 of them, or about 12% of all the animals in the state. Davidson County has more sites for any particular county, and they had like 15 at that time. Sullivan County was right behind them with 14. We were second in the state. And one of the things that we have that's unique and a lot of other counties don't have is we've got 5 dates, carbon dates and so forth, for this fauna, from 19,700 down to 10,560. So we got some good dates when these animals were here. Let me read some of the animals that were found. I guess you're curious on what was found. Now I divided this is my own little thing that I did. It's not anything that most people probably wouldn't do. But I divided it into 5 groups of the animals. Of course, we know they're all here during the end of the Ice Age, the Pleistocene. But I divided them into 5 groups. The animals that were here then that are still here, like the white-tailed deer, that was one group. Second group, the animals that were here during the Ice Age, and they're here today, but they're a smaller form than was here during the Ice Age. An example of that would be something like a southern bog lemming, would be an example of that. Third category I did was the animals that live not in Sullivan County today, but they live not too far away. An example of that would be a redback vole that lives in the Smoky Mountains today at real high elevations. They do not live in this lower area anymore. And then the other 2 categories are animals that are still living, but they live a long way from Sullivan County. Some of them might be 1,000 miles from here. And then the other category I made was extinct animals that just completely gone altogether. Some of the animals that are extinct that were found, tapir, mastodon, mammoth. Those are the 3 that were also found prior to 1969. They were found also after 1969. Dire wolf, extinct wolf, jaguar. Some of the Pleistocene jaguars got to be 450 to 500 pounds. Male jaguar in Central America today is about 225 pounds. So you can see how much bigger they were. Horse, found on a few sites. There was 40 species of horses that probably lived during the Pleistocene. Of course, they became extinct and were reintroduced in the 1500s. Long-nosed peccary, giant ground sloth. Then there were some that I put a footnote beside it because some of these were new records for the whole eastern United States and so forth, but a lot of those records I'm sure have been broken now because this is back in 69, 70, 80, and 91. I found a giant beaver, part of a giant beaver. It was the second one found in the state. This was the largest semi-aquatic animal in eastern North America. Their body size is the size of a black bear. Got to be 480-pound body size, the largest probably, 9 feet long. Giant or a beautiful armadillo. This was the first time this was recorded for East Tennessee, and it's 3 times larger than today's armadillo. Flat-headed peccary. This was the first peccary herd that actually was found in one context. There were 16 individuals found in this one site of peccary. Then I found an extinct muskrat that set the record for the whole eastern United States and south in the United States. And this particular fossil is older than 10 to 20,000 years old. It's the only one that's come out of Sullivan County that I know of. And it goes back to Irvingtonian age. Could go back 500,000 years old, 500,000 years ago. There's a couple other, I'll just break here. There's a couple other extinct animals that I found that weren't during the Ice Age, but they became extinct a lot later. One of them was a passenger pigeon. In the 19th century, there was probably 1 billion of those things living. In 1914, they were completely extinct. They were found on 5 sites in Sullivan County. And the other one would be an extinct fish. It was a sucker, and they were found on a site. And this fish no one knew was going extinct, and it went extinct around 1900. And the only people probably have, I don't even know if there's a full skeleton. I know Smithsonian has a partial disarticulated skeleton of this fish, and I think that's the most complete one if I'm not mistaken. And this was the first site, archaeological site that this fish had been found on in the state of Tennessee, and it was in the early Woodland period. It must have been prominent at that time. I found it in the early Woodland period, starting 1000 BC, and it went all the way up to 1600 AD. So it lived from at least 1000 BC and went all the way up through to historical times, probably 1900 before it became extinct. Then some animals, like I said earlier, that were found on the sites, and they're no longer living anywhere close to here. They may live 1,000 miles away from here today, but one time they were in Sullivan County. I'm just going to read a few of these. Porcupine, pine marten, elk, fisher, gray wolf. Here's some I put with a footnote. Badger. This was the first badger found in the state of Tennessee. Caribou. When it was found, it was a new southern record for the United States. The last ice age, the end of the Pleistocene, was a Wisconsin glaciation. It came down to the Ohio River, as we know today, and this was like a tundra probably down here because you had caribou and so forth walking down in this area. So that was a new southern record for caribou. Least chipmunk, that was a new southern record. Yellow-cheeked vole, new southern and eastern record for the U.S. And there was a bird, black-billed magpie, that was found. That today's range is from Alaska to northern New Mexico, east to Kansas. So you can see where the migration in 10,000 years has moved over. And I guess the follow-up on that would be what we're doing today. Like I said, we have 14 sites today. Any ongoing projects, there's only one dealing with vertebrate fossils that I know of. This winter, I talked to a fellow in archaeology at East Tennessee State, and there's a site that we're looking at that there were some ancient bones. I think they're the old bones, and they were found, and there's also been 2 Clovis points found within that vicinity. So this winter we've got a project kind of dealing with maybe some of these animals. With that, I'd like to get into the archaeology part. When I talk to a lot of people about archaeology, you get a lot of things that people think that's not always the truth. That's just the general perception. As an example, if I had a projectile point up here, this is what archaeologists call projectile points. I guess they're airheads to most people. If I had one of these up here and asked you what culture, group, or tribe it belonged to, and it came out of Sullivan County, I'm sure a lot of people in the room right now are thinking Cherokee Indian. Cherokee they had a real rich and vivid history. They were here when the early settlers came in. So our concept is they've always been here. In reality, the Cherokee as a group of people was here probably 400 years, last 400 years. So if you look at the time, go back to 13,000 years that Paleo-Indian people were here, they represent 3% of the time that Cherokee were in this area, 3%. So chances of those being a Cherokee are very slim. Another thing I might, we call these arrowheads, and This time period I'm showing you, 6,000 to 3,000 BC, and you would think those would be arrowheads because they're small and they would go in an era. The bow and arrow wasn't invented until 1000 BC. So these things are 3,000 years older than an arrowhead. These are actually put on a spear or dart with an adaddle. These are a spear point. But in our mind, we think, smaller arrowheads, bigger spearhead. That's not always the case. That's some of the things that archaeology is not. The definition for archaeology would be a study of man's past or a study of extinct ways of life. The artifacts that are found are important, but they're just the result of the lifestyle that the people have chosen to live in. The Eskimos in Alaska today need an entirely different type toolkit to survive in their environment than someone living in East Tennessee. So the artifacts are definitely important because that's what we study. The definition for an artifact is anything that's produced by human hands. If you go home today and produce a piece of pottery, you've created an artifact. Any artifact that was done in prehistoric times, of course, is a prehistoric artifact. Artifacts are important because they're time markers, or we call them temporal markers. If I were to find a piece of pottery, this is a piece of broken pot or pottery. If I found a piece like this laying in a site, this is what we call Swannanola Cordmark pottery. It's grit tempered. This goes 1000 BC to 500 BC. As a temporal marker, that identifies a time period. Also with that, I would expect to find the projectile points for that same time period, which would be your Upper Valley and your Ebenezer cluster. That's what I would expect to find because I've identified that time period. If I found this pottery at this type, this is long branch fabric marked. It's got limestone tempering in the clay. If I found that on the site, that is 500 BC to 300 AD, and I would look for these triangular looking points, Greenville, Nola, Chuckey, Candy Creek, and Camp Creek. Greenville, no, yeah. Those are the projectile points I would expect to find with that because that's marked that period of time. And this is your first bow and arrow type point. See how they're triangular and smaller? That's your first true bow and arrow type points in this area. The archaeology in our area, what we're trying to do, we have three main aims. One is to establish a chronological sequence of events and dates as they happened in our prehistory. We have in our written history, we know what happened at 1700, 1800, so forth. We have a good chronological order when things happened. In our prehistory, that's the backward extension of our history. What happened 1,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, and so forth. So that's what we're looking for, is to try to get a good chronological scale of what was going on in the county. Second thing is to give us a glimpse of ways of life that no longer exist. In some places, not around here, but even villages have been reconstructed. But around here we look for settlement patterns. Why did all the late Archaic and early Woodland sites show up in one area like Fort Patrick Henry Lake area? That would be a research question. And social organization, that sort of thing. And the third thing we look for is why do these cultures change? Why 1,000 years ago, and if you look back at 4,000 years ago, somewhere along that time, bow and arrow was introduced, pottery was introduced, agriculture, domestication. Why did those things come about and when? So that's the thing we're also looking for. And to get the information, we have to go to what is known as a site, S-I-T-E. Site would be any place that has been modified and or occupied by prehistoric people. If someone came into this area and picked up a chunk of flint and started knocking on it, napping it, and chips were falling on the ground, they're actually modifying that piece of ground. We could call that a site, theoretically, but archaeologists sometimes don't get that picky. They might locate it, but they may call it a locus or a scatter. They may not give it a permanent number unless you found some more stuff to go with it. And a site could be a lot of different things. There could be a cave, like we have in Sullivan County, would be, say, Limbo Cave was a site. Rock shelter, Eastman Rock Shelter. It could be a small seasonal camp, like WKM site on Wilcox Drive. It could be a quarry. There's a place on South Holston Lake where it looks like they quarried their flint, but see, they're modifying the ground. But a site could be any place where they've modified. It could be a large camp, a large village. So the definition just almost endless as long as they've modified the ground or done something. Or cave art would be another one where they modified the walls of a cave. Let me give you some background on the early work that was done here. In, I think it was 1879, the Bureau of Ethnology was established at the Smithsonian in Washington. In 1881, they were given $5,000 to research the mounds and the mound builders. This is in 1879, which has really not been that long ago. But at that time, they thought the mound builders were people that were more advanced and more ancient than the people that were here when Columbus came. So they gave $5,000 for the research. In 1882, Cyrus Thomas was hired and put over that, and he was allowed to hire 3 field assistants. And in 1885, one of the field assistants died, and they promoted a fellow who had been there since 83. They promoted him to a full-time position, and his name was John W. Emmert. And he was the man that actually came into Sullivan County in the 1880s and did some work in here. When he came in, the first things he did was some mounds excavated up in the Hickory Tree area of Sullivan County. In the first mound he found that he dug, he found one burial that he said was sitting up, which is very unusual. I'd never seen that in this area. He also found an 11-inch copper spindle, which is used for spinning or weaving, which I've never heard of in this area. He also found 2 copper tools or awls that he said still had the deer antler handle attached to them. That would be real unusual for this area. So reading this report, it was kind of, you didn't know what to believe really, because I'd never seen anything like it in 50 years. But across the river, on the south side of the river, the same area, he found a mound up there that he excavated. And in the mound, it was 38 feet diameter by 5 foot long, 5 foot high. And this is what he drew the mound looked like. He said there was 12 burials in the mound, and they were each encased in river boulders. He called them beehive vaults, and with a ring of rock around the outside. This looks like something you'd see in a landscaping, not an Indian mound. So this is something else that kind of got me curious. I even talked to Dr. Faulkner at UT about it, and he said he'd never heard of that either, except for one other place in western North Carolina, and John W. Emmert was also the person that excavated over there. So, but anyway, then he dug another mound, and the burials were all sitting up again. And then he went about 2 miles upriver on the north side of the river, and he excavated another mound, and he found 6 burials again that were encased in these vaults, these beehive vaults. Then he came to Kingsport, and about a mile above the head of Long Island, probably in the Cliffside community, he excavated a mound up there. That was a rock mound. It was just a pile of rocks piled up. And in excavating that, he found some mica, which, remember I told you a while ago about temporal markers, about time periods? Mica for us is 300 AD to 1600 AD. That's the time period we associate that with. It's probably been brought in from western North Carolina. It's not local. He also found parts of a soapstone bowl he recorded in that same mound. Time period for that is 3000 BC to 1000 BC. So something's not adding up here. You know what I mean? And then he did some more work in Sullivan County, the island right under Wilcox Drive. He called that Cherokee Island. He did some work there, found some ashes and some pottery over where Pactolus, the Eastman Pactolus dump is on Moreland Drive. He found some he recorded some earth burials and some rock burials on that side of the river. But like I said, all of this didn't add up. And then I researched some, and I found I found a letter that part of a letter that his boss, Cyrus Thomas, had written to the director of the Smithsonian at the Bureau of Ethnology at the time, and he said that the man that came down here had a drinking problem, and it renders his work uncertain. And in 1888, they actually dismissed him. So if you're researching the early history of our area, you know, I don't know if you can believe it. That's the only mound that's been recorded in this county. So I don't know, maybe they were there, maybe they weren't. But anyway, he wanted to come back and work for the Bureau. And in January, and this is what he wrote when he wanted to come back: should I ever have the opportunity of exploring mounds again, I can certainly give you greater satisfaction than I ever did before. And when he came back in January of 1889, he started work again. They hired him back. And in February of that year, he found the Back Creek Stone. The next month, is anybody here familiar with the Back Creek Stone? It's a stone that they found in a mound down in Loudoun County, where Back Creek is in the Little Tennessee River area. And it has an inscription on it that a lot of people say that it's Paleo-Hebrew writing or ancient Cherokee writing. And cult archaeologists are still loving this stone, because they're trying to say that people were here long before Columbus, and that's one of the proofs they're using. Cyrus Thomas himself did not consider the Back Creek Stone to even be authentic. This is the guy at Smithsonian. Then he also found some copper bracelets in a mound down there that they later found out weren't even copper; they were bronze. Native Americans didn't have bronze, so they think these were taken probably from some later sites, like the 18th century. Cherokee sites and so forth, and he had actually probably planted them like he'd found those. So anyway, the Smithsonian work down here you can about throw out the window. But in 1922, Gerard Folk, I mentioned earlier, the Smithsonian, came through the area and he'd found that taper tooth in Bluff City, and he also found a bone tool in that cave, probably a bone awl. Then he comes to Limbo Cave, which is today Appalachian Caverns. And in his report, he said excavation there would be difficult and useless. In 1991, I had the privilege of digging that cave, the front of it, before they opened it up commercially. I found projectile points. I found a lot of broken pottery. Got a carbon date of 675 AD, 1,300 years ago they were living there. And also found 7 Pleistocene animal remains also in that excavation. So again, if you read the early excavation or research in this area, like I said, you can take it kind of with a grain of salt. Then in 1958, TVA comes out with a paper called the Upper Holston Projects. All the dams were built by this time in this area, and no archaeological research was done on any of these lakes before they were flooded. And the reason probably, this is what they had to say: there was a survey done by qualified representatives of the Division of Anthropology at the University of Tennessee, and it indicated that there were no archaeological manifestations of any importance in this area. I mean, they're saying there's nothing here. And they said the topography not suitable for permanent Indian habitation, and that apparently was and apparently there were no prehistoric village sites that showed any appreciable depth of deposit. So no one looked at this area. Like I said, until 1969, there were 12 sites in this whole area. I used to go to the Tennessee archaeological meetings in the 60s, and people in Nashville would say, well, you don't have anything up in your area. You know, that's what they tend to believe. Somewhere along the line, people got smart and figured there was something up here. And because today we have 338 sites. Some of the things, I'll tell you a few of the things that happened to get those numbers up real quick. In 1974, Major McCullough at the University of Tennessee did a survey on Reedy Creek. They were thinking about rechanneling for flood control. He found 6 new sites. 1986, they dropped Patrick Lake for the first time since it was inundated in 53. I was able to do that work. I found 65 new sites. 1998, there was consulting crew that worked with TVA that did a survey on Boone Lake. They found 35 new sites. 2009 shoreline survey was done on South Holston Lake. They found 32 new sites. So right there is about 130, 140 new sites. Then there's been highway projects. I can name several different things, but that's how it got us up to 338. And the most important thing that I think that's come out of all the work to this time is the dates that we've gotten from these different sites. Today we have 37 carbon dates or luminescence dates for these sites, from 4,850 years old down to about 400 years old. And we've got all these dates at different times that we know things have happened. I remember when early Woodland, we used to say started 800 BC. Today it starts 1000 BC because we've been able to push back the time. I found domesticated sunflower seeds in a feature fireplace. They dated at 2,394 years old. So they were domesticating sunflowers by then. So that date pushes us back on when domestication started. So that's the importance of having dates, is they get these, putting everything in a tighter window of things. The ongoing projects that I would mention is that just this year we've got we've got 4 new dates already for Sullivan County. One cave art site in the county has been tested, and we got charcoal that's in the process of being sent off to get a date. And we also have some pottery from another site down below Long Island that's going to be sent off for a date there. So that's kind of where we are, ongoing research with that. Real quickly, I want to get into those slides, but we have, in this area, we have 4 prehistoric time periods. We have Paleo-Indian. Paleo-Indian are the people that hunted the mastodon and mammoth. They were here from 11,000 BC to 800 BC. About the only thing that we had left from them to identify themselves is stone tools. All the perishable items are gone. As far as we know, they didn't dig any kind of holes in the ground as far as fireplaces or anything, or hearths. And they were big game hunters. If these animals moved, they had to move with them. That was their food. So they weren't in one place very long. And then the next period of time after that was what we call the Archaic Period. It goes from 8,000 BC to 1,000 BC. In this time period, these people begin to settle down a little bit, and they become hunters and gatherers. Some of the fireplaces we found, hickory nut shells, burnt acorns, other plant foods. They were notorious for building these little fireplaces or hearths, and they would line them with rock, river rock, and they would heat them up, and they would put things in them and cover it over, and that was like a baking oven. And if you find those are real common for archaic sites. During this period of time, the grooved axe was introduced. They didn't have pottery at this time, so they were carving the bowls out of soapstone. And the spear thrower that I was talking about a while ago, the adaddle, also was introduced during this period of time. At the end of this period, we start seeing a little bit of trade go on. We start seeing some copper that probably came from the Lake Superior area that was traded into the area. We also see some marine shale, probably from the Gulf of Mexico, starting to show up in the area. And then the period right after that is the Woodland Period. And the Woodland Period, the people became a sophisticated agricultural society. This you see in your first cultural plants. Corn was introduced. You see the bow and arrow come about near this period of time. Pottery, domestication, agriculture. If any mounds were built, this is the people that started building the earthen mounds. And they were starting to settle down a lot more. In some places, not here, but in some places they even had towns by this time with a lot of people living in them. And the last period of time was the Mississippian Period from 900 AD to 1600 AD. This is the pinnacle of prehistoric culture. These people were very artistic. They would, on their pottery, they would make effigy figures, human figures or animal figures. In their shell work, you'd see a lot of artistry. They would carve animals such as rattlesnakes, spiders, woodpeckers, and so forth. And at this period of time, these people were really dependent on agriculture. During this period of time, we also had new strains of corn. Beans were introduced during this period of time. But because the bottomland was so precious, there was a lot of warfare. People was trying to take it away from them. So they actually had towns that they would have put a stockade around called a palisade. We start seeing palisades about 1400 AD, and basically just for protection. And about 1500, for some reason, when they reached the height of all this culture, around 1500, a lot of these places started to break up. Maybe because of overexpansion. Their regional networks, that they had people out there, they were trading, probably bringing salt out of Saltville down the valley and so forth. A lot of their networks started breaking up. Of course, a lot of politics probably by that time. And there was one soldier that was with DeSoto in 1540, and he went to one of these Mississippian villages in northern Georgia, and he said it was a metropolis, a large city. He went back with Juan Pardo in 1567. He said there was like 30 huts left. So all these people are starting to break up, disperse, and see down there they had what they call a chiefdom, which is basically controlled a large area of land. That chiefdom in Georgia, actually some people living in Dandridge, Tennessee, was under that chiefdom all the way in northern Georgia. So you can see that there was a lot of networking that had to be done. But in the 1500s, these people started dispersing, and out of that, we have a lot of the tribal names that we hear today are real late. Like I said, the Cherokee, I won't read it, but the Cherokee, Chris Rodding said that he agreed with other people that Cherokee was not a social entity specifically identifiable as Cherokee until probably the end of the 17th century. We're talking about late 1600s. So again, that goes to show how bad our concept is of that. I'd like to get into some slides, and with the slides, I loaded 3 different projects I worked on in Sullivan County. Archaeologists would like to have time to go do what they wanted to do and have fun doing, but you don't always get that luxury. One set of slides, I had 10 days to dig before they were going to destroy it on a construction project. Another site, Patrick Henry Lake was dropped in 1986. First time it was dropped since it was inundated in 53. I didn't know when the lake was going to be coming back up. But this is what we call a reconnaissance surface survey, and all I'm doing is walking and recording the sites. That was the whole purpose, no digging. Well, we did one small dig when UT came up, but I'll show you. But that's what we call reconnaissance site survey. Then the third set of slides I want to show you are, I actually had time to do a full-scale excavation. So that's the reason I loaded these 3 particular sites. If you're looking for material in this area, the raw material is probably going to be, if you're looking for a site, this is one thing you'd be looking for right off the bat is these chips or lithic flakes. And these all came out of one site. If you look at the color, the black and gray, this is real common for Knox dolomite. It is what everybody calls limestone around here. Most of it is dolomite. And this is the rock that comes out of that. It's a black and gray Knox flint. If you see this 40 SL34, that's the site number that was given by the state for this particular site. If something was labeled with that number on it and goes to California, they could call the state of Tennessee and Nashville and say, I've got an artifact out here, 40 SL34, where's it come from? 40 is Tennessee state number, Sullivan County, the 34th site, and Tennessee could tell them exactly where that particular artifact came from if it was labeled. Another thing you'd look for if you were looking for a site would be the finished projectile points. Another thing you'd look for is their diet. This is almost all white-tailed deer that these people were eating. Charcoal. Charcoal tells us several things. One, we can get a carbon date. If we can identify the wood, which a lot of times you can identify the wood, you can tell what the climate was here. If you found something like fir and some of the colder type wood, you'd know that you were in an early vegetation zone. and shellfish. This is the mussel shells out of the river. There was also another shell that lived in the river. The rivers are too dirty for those today, but they're called an IO shell. And those are things you look for. Those are things they ate. Now, if you were looking for a site and there was no bones showing up, no flint chips, no projectile points, you might look for firecrack rock. And these have been in a hearth, in a fireplace, and these things, by being heated and cooled, eventually they come apart. They spoil and break apart. These I glued back together that came out of a fireplace. So that may be the only thing that you know if you're looking on top of the ground and nothing else shows up but firecrack rock, that might be the only indication there's something there. Pottery would be something you'd look for, broken pottery, but pottery only was introduced about 1000 BC. So if you're looking for anything older than that, you're not going to find any pottery. The first set of slides I want to show, this is Kenyard Lake. You can see Warrior's Path up here, Duck Island. This is Boone Dam. What I want to do is just take one little section of this lake. It's 10.4 miles on each side. I was able to walk both sides of that. I found 65 new sites, also found 43 what they call scatters or locusts, small concentrations. But I'm just going to walk you along this one area so you can kind of see what I saw. Right up under the bridge where I started, there was a spring came in up here. You can see where the rocks have collapsed. I found some material there. This is some of the things that were found. These are net sinkers. These notch stones, that's what they use for net sinkers. I found a projectile point and a chopping tool. That tool up on top, that's what we call expedient tools. They, if they came into an area and they needed something to open the mussel shells or beat on something, they would find a rock, make an edge on it where they could do what they wanted to do, then they just discard it. And that's what we call expedient tools. They could go 100 miles down the river and do the same thing the next time. It's not anything they put a lot of work in.
You have a question, I see.
That does look better, even up here. Well, now you can see the notches in those nut stones. Yeah, thank you for doing that. Before the pottery, like I said, they carved soapstone bowls. Also on that same side I just showed you is a fragment of a stone bowl. Going on downriver, this is in the Smith Shoals area, if anybody knows where that is. Look at all the firecrack rocks showing up. Even before you get there, you can tell there's something going on there. Found some pottery, the grit tempered. You see the grit and quartz grains in that. This is another expedient type tool probably, and some more projectile points. This is, when I got out to that lake, I didn't even go out there for the first 2 weeks it was down because I was working. I didn't really want a project to do. And I called Dr. Faulkner at UT and asked him if TVA was going to do anything because I was curious if anything. I didn't know what was under that lake bottom, and I was curious in the archaeology. He said TVA considered it a temporary letdown and they didn't plan on doing anything out there. So I thought, well, I'll go out and start walking. But you can see the four-wheelers, all the people's tracks in here. When I got out there, it had already been hunted, basically. But in that one rock pile, they missed, this is about 11-inch grooved axe that they missed. These are the expedient tools I was talking about to dig a hole in the ground or open up a mussel shell and so forth. Also at that same place I just showed you with the firecrack rock, there's more pottery and more projectile points. Look at all this, this is another site over here and a little creek coming in. And this happened to be a historical site. I don't remember the age, it's in the report, but this is some of the early stuff that was picked up there. I also collected all the historical artifacts off of the lake also, not just the prehistoric. And coming on downriver, before I got to this bluff, you can see all this firecrack rock. This at one time was nothing but hearths and fireplaces, and with all of the action of the lake, they were probably covered over with dirt or soil, and then the sediments, and then all the lake action has actually exposed all the rocks again, and they've just collapsed. That's when they're all in one pile. You may have had this much ground with a lot of fireplaces and hearths, And now it's all dropped to the bottom, and all the dirt, of course, is gone.
SD, where?
This, this all went to TVA. They got a report out on this. But yeah, everything here, I actually had to get permission through the University of Tennessee from TVA to do the project because it was federal property.
What did
They put out a report on it.
I mean, what did they do with all the artifacts?
I don't know. It's probably stored somewhere. I don't know. But they've got them. I showed you that big cluster of rocks, the site just before. There's a broken celt in here, like an ungrooved axe, some more pottery sherds, and some more projectile points. There's a white-tailed deer molar. And then there were some areas were just, what I had to do is make sure there wasn't any caves to be explored in the area that was straight bluff to water. And then I went on around that edge of the bend. This was kind of an unusual place. I walked right up on it. It's like the people had just got up and left. You can see 3 hearths. Look at those rock hearths there. It's just like they had just got up and walked away. And each one of those, you can see all the firecrack rock in it. There's one of them. And there's a second one. The waves have kind of pushed it aside, but you can see the shape pretty much. And there's the third one. And of course, yeah, well, this is kind of stuff that's found in them.
So you depend on finding artifacts in the rock.
Yeah, around the fireplaces and stuff you'd find. And you see all the firecrack rock. That didn't happen overnight, camping 1 or 2 times. They probably stayed there for, a good period of time for those rocks to be heated and cooled that much to even explode and come apart. But there are some of the things that are found around those fireplaces. In the Warriors Path Park area, the only place on the lake, we found 5 of these, you could call them shell pits. Some people call them clam bakes, but what they were doing was going down to the river, getting these freshwater mussel, and coming up there, probably throwing them in a fire, and they would open up and they would feast there. There was 5 of these big shell pits. There's some of the shell that came out of there and a piece of bone. I called Dr. Faulkner at the University of Tennessee and told him about this unique shell pits. The only time I'd seen them, he had a fellow to come up from the University of Tennessee, got permission from TVA to actually do some kind of a little trench because we didn't have an age on what we were finding. So he came up and we did a little small excavation while he was here. And when he, with the stuff that we found, it turned out to be, we found an Edens type projectile point, which is 3000 to 1000 BC. So that's when those shell pits were there. This is a place that was on upriver. Actually, someone else had found these up there, and I've seen the site. I collected what was up on top, and this particular piece here, and another fellow had been there, and I took those pictures of what he had found. 2 celts, ungrooved axes. So that's the first project. That's what we call reconnaissance surface survey. I'll back up here a little bit. In archaeology, we call, you may see this term, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Phase 1 is what I just showed you. That's when you go into an area and you just collect on the surface. Phase 2 is if there's enough material there to deem a test, you actually do a test of the site. That's a phase 2 project. Phase 3 is when you go in and you excavate, full excavation. So that I just showed you was phase 1. Back up there, Blaine. This, if you know where McDonald's is on Stone Drive, Pizza Hut, there was a piece of ground there right beside the road, 50 foot off the road in 1982 that they were grading off, and I knew there used to be an old garden there, Gibson's on the property when I was young, and I knew there was, used to find a lot of projectile points in there, so I went up on the ground, got permission from the people there working, and got permission to go up there and look around. And this is what I found on top of the ground. So I asked them if I could go in there and do a small test, maybe just do a 1 meter square and just see if there's anything below the surface. This is a 1 meter square that I dug, went right into a fireplace. So he told me I had to get permission, insurance, I had to sign an insurance waiver in case I got hurt and so forth. But he gave me permission to dig, but he said in 10 days I'm gonna level this about 8 feet. So what do you do? I mean, we know there's features there, so I went down and talked to the guy on heavy equipment that was doing the work down there and asked him if he would come up there and push all the topsoil off. The topsoil had been plowed years and years, and all that was just a mixture of stuff. He didn't really tell us anything. So I had him to come out and push all the topsoil off. And when he did, look at these fireplaces showing up. This is what they look like. And the reason they're dark like that, if you went out in yellow soil and you dug a hole in the ground, even if you just throw the dirt back in it, the topsoil in it, it's going to be a different color. So with the burning and the topsoil and so forth, these features, this is how obvious they were. This is another one. This is actually where a billboard sign post had been in the ground. And here's the original square that I dug for a test, and I went right into the edge of that fireplace. Here I've taken that fireplace out. And look at all the firecracker rock that came out of it. This is one, this is another one, and all the rock that came out of it. And here's another one. There was eight fireplaces, or hearths, I should say, altogether. These are some of the projectile points that came out. Features on the site is anything that could be a fireplace, hearth, anything that's indifferent to the site itself would be called a feature. So here's the way the site looked at the time. This was my original square. You can see all the fireplaces and everything dug out. Just to make sure there wasn't anything else there, I had to come up and make a cut up near Stone Drive, and there was nothing else up here. So the whole site was right there. I mean, that's they came. Reedy Creek is down here, way down on the bottom there is Reedy Creek. So you can see they were just camped on top of that knoll, and that's the way it looked. That was their camp right there. I sent.
These hearths that you excavated, are they typically that deep when the natives were using them?
You know, normally not in this period of time. They're not, but they must have been here a long period of time and just built these things up. Rocks, you know, rocks were in there. They probably put more rocks in it. You know what I mean? They started feeling. Look at all the rocks that came out of them. That's an extremely lot of rock too for a feature. I was able to get a charcoal sample out of one of the features. It was sent to the Smithsonian. It was 4,080 years old. So in 10 days, I was able to dig a site and get a date, which that's almost unheard of. So that was a great project. And this is what went in there after they leveled this about 8 foot. Today, I think you got AutoZone, Little Caesars down there across from McDonald's. And the next set of slides was in 1979. Is at the head of Long Island, and I knew there was a place up here, an overhang or a rock cliff that looked like it ought to have some material under it. Looking on the surface, there was nothing on the ground. There was no bone, no shell, no flint. It just looked like a good place for somebody to live. So I went to the Eastman and asked them if I could do some work on their property. And of course, the first thing they want to know is who I was. But I got a letter from them saying that I had permission to dig, and I had asked them if anything was found, did they want, what portion do you want? And they wrote right in the letter that if anything was found, that it was mine because they were not in that business for a display. So this is here I am down here, just to give you an idea. This is that cliff right at John B. Dennis Bridge in Kingsport. And it was kind of misleading for being a rock shelter because the roof actually is up here about 40 foot or 50 foot tall, but when it rained, the drip line was way out here. You had like 20 foot of dry space under this thing. This is the way it looked when I went in there. The reason there was no artifacts on top of the ground is that it all had been flooded over and there was a lot of silt, alluvial material deposited over the site. You can see all this sand. But that's my first, I put a datum point on the wall. I came out 10 foot, 15 foot, and made a 5 foot square. This is just a dark slide, but then in the hole, look, you can see the alluvial material on top up there. And I got down into this dark soil. This is where the mid material showed up. This hole got too deep to get in and out of, so I had to make another one, and then another one. So here I've actually got a 20-foot ditch going, a north-south trench, going from the wall out toward the river. This was dug in 6-inch levels too. The first 6 inches level 1, second 6 inches level 2, and so forth. I wasn't working at this time in '79, and I had this good trench here, but I had plenty of time, so I thought I would go ahead and do another trench back to the west that'd give me a good profile, a good east-west, north-south profile of that site. When I did, something I wasn't looking for, didn't expect, found a burial in there. This is what we call a full flex burial. This is before the laws changed, by the way. This was in '79. The laws changed in '87 that you can't remove burials anymore. So just to clarify that. This is the burial laying in that trench.
So SD, as you were excavating this burial, were you camping at the site, just staying there?
No, I was there from daylight to dark.
Yeah.
Every day. I was actually there like 180 days.
Right.
Did you date that area?
Did I dig that?
Did you date it?
Yeah, these are around 1,500 years old. Yeah, they're middle woodland, about 1,500 years old. No, but every day I was worried about somebody coming in, and here's a second burial I found. It's in a semi-flex position. Only had one little artifact, a little broken projectile point. Neither one of them had any artifacts actually with them. This is that particular burial. Here you can see another fireplace or feature down in the ground. I'd actually taken that one out up there. You can see where the fireplace is. Went down about another foot, and there was 2 more in that area. You can see what, back up there, you can see if you ever dig under a rock shelter, this is what you got to deal with. This is either the ceiling or the back wall at one time had collapsed, and I had to take a sledgehammer in there and actually break it up and throw it out so I could get down to where the dirt was.
You did all this by yourself?
Yeah. Here you can see the progress going on. You can see the 6-inch levels. At this time, this was in like October, maybe early November of '79, and I knew that it was going to start getting cold, and I thought I better go ahead and dig that upper end of the side out because this is in the dry. I could dig this in dead winter. So the next part of the project was to take out that upper end. Here you can see I've already taken it out. Now I'm starting to work against the back wall, taking out the rest of it. And that's just another slide showing I'm still digging that way, trying to take that soil out. And when I did, there was 3 more burials in one feature there. This one's the only one that really had any artifacts with it. It had about 300 and I think 10 shell beads about the size of a dime, had a hole drilled in them. And these are made out of whelk or conch shell. These aren't local shell. These are from the Gulf of Mexico probably. Definitely a marine shell. I found there's an adult here. There's a 5 or 6 year old infant here probably. And see the skull up here, that's a newborn probably, real small. There was 3 buried in that one burial. I found a large blade laying in the, when I dug around the sternum of the breastbone, I found a large blade. And right under the breastbone, that gray thing right there is a projectile point that was actually shot through the front, and it was lodged between the 9th and 10th ribs. It didn't go all the way through. So you wonder why there's 3 in one burial. There's probably a reason for that. I mean, I don't know what happened, but I'm sure they didn't all die the same day, you know. Here you can see I've started, I've had all the burials out. I'm below all the pottery zones at this time, and I'm just wanting to see if there's anything else, any. I don't want to leave a site not knowing if there's something below it. You know, they could be a whole nother culture down there. So here I'm just starting to take out the bottom. And I'd been here for like 3 months solid. And when I left, Blaine, this is what you were talking about. People came over and started to, I wasn't there anymore, so they started looking for airheads. So you can see what they're doing. Even the vandalism back here, just for no reason, tearing the wall up. But right before I had left, this is the feature that the domesticated sunflower seeds came out of that were 2,394 years old. So when I saw what they were doing, I went ahead and took one square right here, and I went straight down just to see if there was anything below there, because I didn't know if there was any more of that site left. I went down to 7 feet, 7.5 feet. I didn't find anything. About 7.5 foot, I found another living floor. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to come back again. So when I came back in the spring, I waited until in the winter. This is what they'd done to the site. But this is my square that I did right before I left. I came back in and cleared up. You can see the height here. I cleared up the hole I dug, and I'm starting to continue on with the excavation. Here you can see this red streak in here. That's the living floor that I found the year before. I found some charred nutshells out here. It looked like they'd probably roasted them, and rather than, it's not a fireplace, they probably just dumped the shells out there in a pile.
SD, were you screening this too?
Yeah, everything was sifted through 1/4-inch wire, 1/4-inch screen. This is the living floor right here. Once I cleaned that off, look at that big rock hearth down there. This is like 7.5 to 8 feet in the ground. You can see the depth going on down. What I was looking for was rock bottom. I wanted to see if I wanted to go down to, but I knew I was at the bottom. So you can see the depth with the 2 shovel handles there. I'm probably down 8 feet, 9 feet there. And here I finally saw what I've been waiting on for a year, was this rock bottom starting to turn. And then there's a sandbar here of yellow sand. I even found a fireplace in that. It had burnt freshwater drum fish pallet pieces in it. But here I went down 12 foot and 3 inches till I found the rock bottom.
You ever calculate how much dirt you moved?
I actually had a fellow to do it. He said a cubic yard of this dirt weighs 1.25 tons. And he figured out how much dirt had come out of there. He said it was 512,000 pounds or 256 tons of dirt came out of that one hole. Some of the artifacts that I found up near the top of the ground, this is real late pottery, probably from at least 14 AD to maybe 1700, and a rim of a little polished rim of a pot. These are real late. A site is like a layer cake. You know, when you first went in, the earlier people are going to be on bottom. The next layer is not as old, and you come right on up like a layer cake. When you excavate, you're excavating from the top down. So that's what I'm going to do with these slides, just kind of give you an idea of what I saw as it went down into the ground. That was pretty near the top. These are your triangular points called Hamiltons, Madisons, and so forth. And these are real late. These started basically in the late Woodland, 900, probably 700 AD to 1600 AD. These are the projectile points I was finding up in the top of these sites. Some of the pottery, this is middle Woodland, 300 to 700 AD. They crushed limestone and mixed it with the clay. This is called a Radford plane design. There's no design on it. These are the beads that come out of that one burial. This is a piece of a conch or whelk shell that wasn't worked, but that's your marine shell that was traded in here. Some of these other shells were used for tools. That was probably put on a stick for something and used maybe for a spoon or a scraping tool. And here's some just more projectile points as you're going down in the ground. These are 1000 BC to 300 AD. These points run, these are archaic, these from about 8,000 down to 1,000 BC. Then on down in the lower levels, I found these real early projectile point, probably around 10,000 year old plebs of St. Charles. Here's some tools, burins or things they could engrave with, and some of the early projectile points. And then also at the shelter, I found a piece of a Clovis point. Here I just found reconstructed what it would have looked like, but these are the people that hunted the mammoth and mastodon. So the importance of this site was that a lot of sites you have 1 or 2 cultures there, This particular site started at Ice Age and had something there to identify themselves from Ice Age all the way to historical, which is very unusual. This is a new project that's come about in the last couple of years. This is some cave art that's showing up in the county. There's another picture of the face. It looks like maybe the lips are painted. And that's another picture of it. We just got some charcoal from here. We're going to try to get a date on it and figure out who was here. We just did a small test just recently, so this is still in the works. I think that's it.
Is that the only cave art site?
It's the only one. There's supposed to be one other one that's been found here. I don't. Be honest with you, I don't even know where it's at.
Well, thank you, SD.
You're welcome. Thank you. Got any questions?
Let you entertain any questions.
Anybody have any questions about any of that, Ron? Well, the reason I did Sullivan County because I live there, and another thing, there was so much material to cover. In fact, I really had a problem trying to get it within 1 hour. You know what I mean? But Washington County has 141 sites, prehistoric sites. Has 1 or 2 vertebrate sites. Am I right on that? At least 1 I know of, maybe 2. Hawkins County has 300 or 400 prehistoric sites. It's just, like I said, it's just so mind-boggling that I had to really focus in on a small particular, but that's pretty representative of what's here. You know what I mean? You could go Sycamore Shoals, the side that was dug there at the Fudd site back in the 60s. It's early woodland, you know, just like some of the stuff I showed. But yeah, there's sites, there's a lot of sites in this area. I would say in Hawkins County and Sullivan County alone, there's probably 700, 700. We don't know. And then every day there's some construction going on, so you may lose 2 in a day. You know what I mean? That's covered over and we don't even know about. Then so far, when you really think about it, what we've been hunting is the river bottoms and places that around water that we expect them to be. If all that was covered, how many sites are in the next upland that we aren't even looked at yet? So it's hard to say how many sites there are.
Dry cave?
Both. A lot of the ones found with Carnegie were in the caves. All of them were actually. A lot of the previous work was not in caves, so it's both. They've been found both ways. That's basically, I mean, of course you hear other theories, but basically that's the main theory. You know, when the last ice age, the end of the Pleistocene, that ice was 1,000 feet thick on the land, and of course the ocean water had to be taken to make that ice. So Florida was like, what, 10 or 12 miles further out the shore than it is today because there was no water covering it. And so the Bering Strait was exposed. We know that for a fact, so that was a good way to come in. But now they're starting to find stuff in South America that dates the same dates we're finding up here. So I'm not so sure there wasn't several migrations going on, but that's the same one we pretty well accept. In Tennessee, they arrived in Tennessee about 13,000 years ago, about 11,000 BC. But the Clovis Point, Folsom Points, you know, out west, we've accepted that same name as Clovis even in Tennessee. Same people. In what? Archaeology or the bones or archaeology? The archaeology, the Bureau of Ethnology report, 12th annual report, 1894. Bureau of Ethnology, you know, the big books. That tells all about their explorations in here, the Smithsonian. The report of investigations, I think number 22, no, maybe I'm wrong. It was in 1922 that Gerard Folk came through the area. They're just, you know, a lot of that old research. The new stuff, there's been a book written on the Fort Patrick Henry survey. There's been an article written on the Eastman, a couple of articles on the Eastman dig and so forth, and a lot of that hasn't been put out there yet. Hopefully, if I ever get time, I would like to just make some kind of a prehistory of Sullivan County book, you know what I mean, and put all that information in there, because a lot of it's personal experiences. Who's got them?
Yeah.
TVA has the material came off of their site on the Patrick Henry Lake. The Eastman Rock Shelter material went to University of Tennessee. There's been one master thesis written out of that material. Been several papers. It's in the process right now. Jay Franklin, East Tennessee State, is bringing the stuff back to East Tennessee State out of the Eastman Rock Shelter. And Blaine has even maybe entertained the idea of maybe making a display here at the Great Fossil Site. That might happen. So,
The stuff from Appalachian Caverns, Linville.
yeah, they got, in the last few years, I've actually just been working with East Tennessee State, basically. The stuff that's been found here recently, basically all this material has been given to Jay Franklin over there, because he's the archaeologist in the area, and we're trying to keep all that stuff. You know, I probably need to mention, I mentioned real early that I got some really professional training at an early age. I probably need to mention, if you find something, a site that has something showing up, once you remove that from that site, you've destroyed the evidence, basically. Because every site that I dug, you can't dig them again, they're destroyed. So, same with your Pleistocene sites. So if anything's found like bones or material that indicates a site there, somebody probably should be called that's knowledgeable enough to at least look at it. I just do it as a hobby, as an
What you're doing is just as important as what's being done here at the Great Fossil Site?
Well, they're two different time periods. They've got a unique situation that's 4.5 to 7 million years old. There are no more like that. So they've got a particular situation, you know, what they've got. Mine is real late. They're 10, 20,000 years ago. And there's a lot more of those sites around. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Yeah. That's the reason I agreed. Thank you, I appreciate that. That's the reason I agreed to do the program out here. It's just I felt like I had something to offer that probably had never been, all that had never been talked about at one time. So, yeah, we'll look at it. We got 2 or 3 people at that ID night. That's the reason I want to make sure everybody got a flyer. If you didn't, get one on the way out. But if you have a rock, fossil, a prehistoric artifact, anything like that, bring it out, because there's different people here. There's a fellow here that from East Tennessee State's a geologist. At least 1 or 2 of those people will be here. Some volunteer people will be here. I help on the archaeological part of it. And some other people are usually around with the bone. They can look at the bone. So that's what I've only helped them one time, but it's something I think is real good for the community. If you have something you don't know what it is, to bring it out.
So do you get sponsors?
No, it's just, I've just done this as a hobby. I've done it since I was just young, so like I said, I got started real early, and I figured it was easier to ride the horse in the direction it was going, you know?
That's typical for the Ice Age.
Yeah, that's, what is it, Tapirus viruensis and Tapirus haysi. There are probably 2 that we see recognized locally. Then the one like that, he said, was the one up here is a lot smaller, a lot older too.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up, but if anybody has any questions for SD, he'll be up here for a little bit. Thanks again, SD.
Thank you.